Welcome to Think WTF. This is the first time I've got it right this whole series. I'm pretty proud of myself.
Yeah, I'm sure you're proud of Brett too. I'm used to it. So
Are you talking to my mum?
Is just your mum and yours watching this?
Probably.
Hello, Brett's mum. Yeah.
Mommy.
Sorry. All right, play along.
Play along.
Your mother played along with you. So.
Whoa, look where this is going. Really?
Yeah.
We want to go down that route.
No, let's not go down that route. We won't talk about. Let's keep our focus
Okay.
out of this. Play along.
You promised to take us through in
Yes.
a bit more detail when we talk play along. It's clearly not running short.
No, absolutely not. Probably the easiest way to explain this is to look at game theory. There are two different types of games that we can play. We get the short game, and the objective of the short game is to either win or lose. And in order to win or lose, we need different teams on either side. There are a set of rules, and this is what happens in rugby, cricket, soccer, whatever it is. And this is typically how we like to run our businesses. We have this idea that we have this profit maximization. And what's important about these kind of rules is no one says that this is how we need to do it. You know, it's kind of, we've accepted it and we've just jumped into the game. So we didn't create the game, we've just accepted the game for what it is.
And there are rules, right? I mean, we
Absolutely.
are playing to a set of rules.
Yes, we've agreed to the set of rules. But then there's a different type of game, which is the long-term game, which is really about how do you stay in the game, and that's the objective of the game. And a great example of this would be Minecraft or Fortnite. And the way you stay in the game is to have the capacities and the resources to maintain yourself in the game. And I see it very well in terms of Minecraft or Fortnite, because when my kids run out of resources, they come and ask me for my credit card and we go and buy some more resources, which is a different type of game. And what is happening in terms of the...
Sometimes it's not even resources, it's just skins. Just to look good. It's
But
that
that's
Instagram
resources. No, it's
yeah.
resources. Think of it as resources, because you know, this is a real business that you're running, and if you're going to run out of resources because you're thinking skins, you're going to have a problem. Sorry, Brett. So, you know, you can think of this in one of two ways. The short-term game is the old industrial game, profit maximization. We're running this on quarters, whereas the new digital game is this long-term game, the sustainability game. And this is how we've got to think of our businesses. And when you've got a short-term game against a short-term game, there's a clear outcome. There's no fundamental conflict. Yet when we have this long-term game against this long-term game, there is no conflict either, because we're in the same playing field. But the conflict arises when we start competing short-term versus long-term. So the great example here, and I'm going to use Amazon as the key one on this, because they're the ones that have really leveraged this and made this work extremely well. So what we're talking about here is really this conflict between the short-term game and the long-term game. So if we take a company like Google, or more specifically Amazon, I like using Amazon, it's just a more tactile example, versus say Walmart. Walmart is driving down costs, they're running this old-term game, or this industrial type of game, whereas Amazon has just looked at the industry and said, we are running a sustainable game here. We are wanting to stay in the game, and we will survive by being in the game the longest.
And
so
you
that's
see
the
that,
approach.
you see it in their revenue, right?
Absolutely.
They're not reporting on the revenue, they're running equally.
Absolutely.
It's not about greed, it's about building something sustainable.
Well, it does become about greed,
Greed,
because,
right.
I mean, ultimately they become so big it actually becomes a problem, and it goes back to your China example. So there is that issue. But if you go and look for any comments around Jeff Bezos online, what you're going to find are things that are like, whoa, that is such a cool idea, that's such a different thought process. And the reason is very simple. He's playing by his own rule book. And that's the big difference here.
Yep.
That's the game. So in order to stay in the game, you've got to play by this long-term idea. You've got to be able to be sustainable in the long term. And it's a completely different thought process. It's not about profit maximization. It's about creating value with your customers. And when your customers truly love what you're actually doing for them, they're not going to think about your competition, because they're going to be in love with you, and they're going to want to keep coming back for more and more and more. And that's how you stay in the game. Your customers are the resource. Remember, you talked about the resource.
Right.
Yeah, your customers are your resource. So information is not the resource. That grows the network, but your customers are the resource. that keeps you in the long
I
term
keep
game.
thinking about Apple. They've built such a good relationship.
Absolutely.
They're always there to buy your product.
Absolutely. You know what? It's an interesting one, and maybe why I don't really use it. But Apple plays the long-term game as well. But I really love Apple's products. I genuinely do. They're beautiful products, well designed, and they just work. No, seriously. I mean, they really do. But I don't like Apple as a company.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
and I'm conflicted about it.
Monolithic kind of play on it.
Yeah, they've got too much control, which is the same with Amazon, mind you. Facebook, Google. There's too much control in these companies over too many domains, which is an issue. But that's aside.
But that's also where the distributed nature of trust is going to come in, and
Yes.
hopefully it levels those playing fields, because the power should be with the customer in the long run,
It should be.
and it needs to be respected
Yeah, and
through a mechanism of trust.
and it's going to take a while, right? It's really going to take a while. So that's really what the idea of playing long is. You've got to change your thinking. This is not a stock standard MBA strategy. It's a completely different approach. You've got to put your customers first, your staff second, and ultimately your shareholders third. You've got to stay in the game.
It's a bit like our environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got to be sustainable. We've got to play the long
Absolutely.
game. It's not just about the single person. It's about the ecosystem.
Totally.
The
Absolutely.
long play is everything.
The long play is everything. Yeah.
And on that note,
Thank you.
thank you.
Cheers.